Now in chapter 12, we talked about the cell cycle and how cells have to divide to get new cells. And this is really what you would call an asexual form of reproduction because you start with one cell and it divides into two. And both cells, the new cells, have the same genetic material. Well, we need to have one more type of cell division. And again, I said you can either call it meiosis or meiosis. I've heard both. Anyway, this is the sexual cell cycle, and this is important because what we need to do here is we need to change things, okay? We need to end up with, instead of having one cell divide into two with the same genetic material, we actually have one cell divides once and then twice. So that you end up with four cells, but each cell has half the genetic material because those two cells those are sex cells, those four, and when they combine with another cell, now you're going to have the full number again. So we have to have a special cell division, and it's called, and again, I call it meiosis. You can call it meiosis. It depends on, I guess, who's talking. Okay, so again, we know that living organisms, one of their characteristics that makes them living is their ability to reproduce, and they reproduce their own kind. Okay, and that really comes from the DNA. That's why dogs have puppies and they don't have, horses, because their offspring are similar to their parents. Okay, so this is called hereditary. It's the transmission of your traits from one generation to the next. Okay, and that again comes from those chromosomes. The information to build you is on those chromosomes, and all the traits, all the blueprint to build you, that's where it comes from. So you inherit those traits from your parents. Okay, there is some variation. And again, that's because you're getting genetic material from two individuals. Okay, if you're a bacteria, the bacteria babies look just like mom or dad, I guess, whichever one you call it. But there's no genetic recombination. There's no more, it's the same genetic material, so they look the same. But because in higher level forms, like people, all animals, I guess, and plants, you have a difference there. You have a mixing of genetic material from the parents. Okay, and the chapter after this we're going to talk about is genetics. Genetics is the scientific study of hereditary and the variation in hereditary. It's what happens with genetics, what happens with those chromosomes, what happens with the genes. We'll talk about that more later. But right now, that's when you're looking at sex cell division, a part of that is your genetics. Okay, so you get your genes. You don't inherit particular traits from your parents. You inherit a gene, and then the gene makes the trait. Okay, and it's usually, when you're talking about traits, there's either a dominant one or a recessive one. Like your nose shape, it either looks like mom or dad. It doesn't seem to be a combination very often of the two, because usually there's a dominant trait. Okay, so when you're talking about that, you don't inherit physical traits, you inherit genes, and those are made into a physical trait, if that makes sense. Okay, and again, that's why I know we're kind of a combination, but we tend to look like one parent more than the other because they might have more dominant traits. Okay, so when our genes come from, and remember, DNA is a bunch of genes. DNA is that long molecule made up of those nitrogen bases. It's made out of nucleotides, but the code in those nucleotides determines the protein. The protein determines everything about you: your hair color, your eye color, your ears, all that stuff is right in that DNA. So if you split the DNA into little parts, you have genes. Genes are units of hereditary, and they make up, that's what they are. They're a segment of DNA. Okay, that's how we pass on information from one generation to the next. And I don't mean like, written down information. I mean the information to build you with arms and legs and all that. Okay, so the genes are passed to the next generation through reproductive cells. They're called gametes, and a gamete is an egg and a sperm. And again, these guys have half the number of chromosomes. So when you were built, you got half your genetic information from ma, half your genetic information from your dad. Okay, and most DNA is packaged into chromosomes, and we talked about that when we talked about cell division. We got the little X's, right? And the X's, when we're getting ready to divide, we double them, and so that each cell gets the same amount of DNA. Okay, we have 46 chromosomes in what they call our somatic cells. Our somatic cells are our normal body cells. Your hair cells, your skin cells, your muscle cells, your heart cells, all those are your body cells, and they're called somatic cells. Okay, And all of those cells have 46 chromosomes, unless you have a genetic disorder, you know. But your gametes, which are either your eggs or your sperm, depending on your male or female, they have half as much, okay? So you don't know for sure what part of your, you're going to get half of your dad's traits and half of your mom's traits, and then they're going to be mixed together and you're going to see what you get, okay? So a gene-specific position along a chromosome is called its locus. So its locus might be close to the middle, it might be toward the end. It depends on whatever the gene is, okay? So when we talked about mitosis, we talked about asexual reproduction. Anytime you put an A in front of a word in science, it means without. So without sex, okay? A mitosis is just the cells dividing in two. You're not recombining DNA. The DNA is the same from each cell, from the beginning cell, the original cell, when it divides and it forms two daughter cells. Each daughter cells have the same genetic information as the cell it came from. That's asexual reproduction. You're passing on the exact same genes. There's no fusion of gametes. There's no changing, okay? A clone is a group of genetically identical individuals from the same parent, okay? They did that with the Dolly. I don't know if you know that. Dolly was the first animal that they made from a clone. She was a sheep. They took a body cell and they actually cloned it and made a sheep. So she's going to be exactly the same as her mom. There's no genetic information being mixed there, okay? So in sexual reproduction, you got two parents. And what happens is the offspring get a combination of genes from mom and dad. And the other thing is, when you have your 46 chromosomes, you only give your child 23 of them. Which 23 you give, it's like heads or tails. It's the same with, the other parent. They give them half their traits. So when you put the two together, that's why we get variations. Unless you're an identical twin, you'll look like your brothers and sisters, but not exactly, because who's to say what combination of genes you got from your parents? Okay, so when we talk about, again, you have to have fertilization, in other words, an egg and sperm coming together, and then you have meiosis. And I'll show you, there's a difference. There's two divisions in meiosis, whereas mitosis was only one. And I'm not talking about phases. I'm talking about mitosis. You start with one cell, it divides, and you get two. With meiosis, you start with one cell, it divides once, and you get two, and then now those two divide again. And in between, they don't double up their DNA. So again, with mitosis, you start with one, you end up with two. Meiosis, you start with one, and you end up with four. And those four cells have half the number of chromosomes, okay? So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. That's why we have 46. You can actually, there's labs, they'll take some of your blood and they'll lay out your karyotype. They do this if you have a child that's born with a genetic disorder, they want to do a karyotype to see where it came from. But they'll put your chromosomes in order, okay? And there's one chromosome, two chromosomes. They actually have it all set up for that. And it's mostly looking at, when they set them up, there's dyes and stuff to put them in the right order, okay? Again, you're going to have two chromosomes. They're two number one chromosome. Mom's chromosome, dad's chromosome, okay? They're homologous chromosomes, or homologs. Oh boy, can't talk today. Anyway, so both one chromosome, one came from mom, one came from dad. Then the second chromosome number 2, you're going to have two, one from mom, one from dad, and so on. So when you set up a karyotype, you end up with 23 pairs, okay? The first 22 are what they call autosomes. They're your chromosomes that control, everybody's got those 22. And then when you get to the last set, that's the sex chromosomes, and that's why you got a difference between male and female, okay? They, in their pairs, they're the same length and shape, and they carry the genes controlling the same inherited characteristics. One's from mom, one's from dad. So if eye color is on chromosome 6, on dad's chromosome, even though they look the same, dad's chromosome might say blue eyes and mom's chromosome might say brown eyes. Okay, but the eye color chromosome, or the gene, is there. It just might, it's going to be different because everybody's a little different. Okay, here's an example of a karyotype. They set it up like this, and this is what it looks like when they run it. They make pictures of it, and then they line them all up. So here's the first chromosome 1 and 2, here's chromosome 2, chromosome 3, and so on. And they line them all up. And this would be your karyotype, okay? They can look for genetic abnormalities. One of them you probably heard of is Down syndrome. With Down syndrome, you have an extra chromosome, okay? Trisomy 21 it's called. instead of 2 21s, they have 3. Okay, and then they can see that in a karyotype. Okay, the sex chromosome, again, which determines if you're a male or a female. If you get an X from mom and an X from dad, you're a girl. If you get an X from mom and you get a Y from dad, you're a boy. Dad is the one that determines whether he has a son or a daughter. Mom has nothing to do with it because all she has is X's. Okay, that's all she can give. So if you guys are mad because you have 6 daughters, it's all on you. Okay, the guy determines whether it's a male or a female. Okay, human females, I just said, are XX. Human males are XY. The Y chromosome is what makes you a male. Okay, if you don't get a Y chromosome, you're a female. And that's how it works. Okay, and again, mom can only give, because females are XX, so they can only give X. She can give this one or this one. That's the option she has. A guy either gives an X and then he has a daughter, or if he gives a Y, he has a son. Okay, so again, boys, guys, all on you. Okay, the other 22 pairs, again, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and 22 pairs, the first 22 are called the autosomes. And then the last pair, pair 23, is called the sex chromosomes. And again, that's the one that determines what sex you are. There's some other things on there too, obviously, but okay. So each pair of chromosomes includes 1 chromosome from each parent. You're going to line them all up, all 23 pairs, and you got chromosome 1, there's 2 of them, 1 from mom, 1 from dad, and so on and so forth. I think I already went through this. I'm babbling, sorry. Okay, so 46 chromosomes in the human somatic cell. And when I talk about somatic cell, that means it's not a sex cell, okay? A normal cell. That's not right either, because sex cells are abnormal. But when you just look at a normal, like a skin cell, that's a somatic cell, okay? So you have 2 sets of 23, 1 from ma, 1 from dad, okay? And they're called diploid, okay? Diploid, 2N. N is, if they were separated, you'd have 23, so 2 times 23 would give you 46. So a diploid cell has 2 sets of chromosomes. And again, that's what all the cells in your body are except for your sex cells. Okay? And again, our diploid number is 46. All right? In a cell which DNA synthesis has occurred when you've doubled it, actually each chromosome is replicated, remember, because you're going to split in 2. Before it splits in 2, then it has double the information because it's going to hand off into each of the 2 new identical sister cells or daughter cells. Each one's going to get sister chromatids. Seeing a pattern here, guys? I think cell division is all about the girls. I'm telling you. First you got daughter cells and you got sister chromatids. But anyway, each chromatid is exactly the same. So that's why we talked about this already with mitosis. Okay, so here we got them lining up, you know, the centromere. But really this half and this half are the same. So when it divides, you're going to get it. But now here's talking about like when we have fertilization. The red ones are coming from mom and the blue ones are coming from dad. Okay, so you're going to get this, you know, you're going to get half of each of these from your parents. Okay, a gamete is either a sperm or an egg, the sex cells, and they only have half the number of chromosomes, so they're called haploid, which is they represent with N. It has a single set of chromosomes. So if you looked at a sperm cell, you wouldn't see 46 chromosomes, you'd see 23. Okay? And again, so we have the diploid number is 46, the haploid number is 23. Or you can think 23 pairs is a diploid, and half of that 23 would be the haploid number. And they represented by N and 2N. Okay? So each set of 23 consists of 22 autosomes and 1 single set sex chromosome. And again, this is where you get the X and the Y. All the egg cells only have X. That's all mom has. But the sperm cells either have an X or Y, and that's going to determine whether you have a boy or girl. Okay, so in an unfertilized egg, in that sex cell is going to be, the chromosomes has to be an X. Again, that's all mom has. So all those egg cells have X for the sex chromosome. The sperm are 50-50, half are X, half are Y. Okay, I think, oh, we can do one more here. And then we're done because we're just about at 15. In a sperm cell, the sex chromosome can either be an X or Y. And again, that determines whether you have a male or female. So it's all in the guys, okay? So again, haploid means half the number, and that's what the sex cells have, okay? So we'll pick it up the next part of the chapter later.